So, I want you to picture a unicorn.
A unicorn. Okay.
Yeah. You know the drill, right? White horse, majestic spiral horn. Maybe it's galloping through some misty glade.
Very vivid.
Right. It's a beautiful image. It's distinct. You can describe it perfectly to anyone. But if I told you to go outside and actually catch one.
I'd be looking for a very long time.
Exactly. You'd never find it because while the concept is incredibly vivid, the creature just doesn't exist in reality.
So I'm assuming we aren't pivoting to cryptozoology for today's deep dive.
No, not quite. We're talking about a political concept that our source for today argues is exactly like that unicorn. It's something you hear about constantly on the news, something we all think we understand. But when you actually look at the hard data, it just vanishes.
Right. We're talking about the concept of humanitarian intervention.
Yes. The idea that a powerful nation, sends its military into another country purely to save innocent lives.
Which is a heavy topic. And we should establish right up front, we aren't just pulling this out of thin air. We are doing a deep dive into a very specific text today.
A really intense text, honestly.
Yes, it is. It's an edited transcript of a speech delivered by an Iranian philosopher and community organizer. And the setting here is crucial. This wasn't some comfortable university lecture hall.
No, it was a teach-in. And it was held effectively underground, right after the brutal repression of protests in Tehran in January of 2026.
Which changes everything about how you read this. The source isn't writing from a theoretical bubble. He's speaking directly into a moment of severe crisis where the Iranian diaspora is basically tearing itself apart.
Right, because you have this massive divide. On one side, he talks about the monarchist far right,
who are very loudly lobbying for a U.S. or Israeli invasion to just decapitate the current regime. They want the hero to swoop in and save the day.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you have progressive voices, like our author, who are stuck in this really agonizing vice quip because they despise the clerical tyranny in Iran.
I mean, they want it gone yesterday.
Exactly. But they are absolutely terrified that help from the outside will just turn Iran into another parking lot.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack his argument. He essentially claims that humanitarian intervention is a myth, that it's used to manufacture consent for imperialist goals.
And he performs this really thorough audit of the idea. He breaks it down into three distinct layers. There's the conceptual, the historical, and the normative.
Basically asking, do states even have a conscience? Does this kind of intervention ever actually work? And do we have the moral right to do it in the first place?
I have to be honest, though. When I first read the outline for this, I felt a little, I don't know, defensive. I mean, surely sometimes countries do the right thing. We send aid, we help after earthquakes.
That's the natural instinct. We want to believe that. But the author starts with the conceptual question, and he is pretty ruthless about it.
Yeah, he just straight up asks, do states actually have morals?
Right, because we love to anthropomorphize countries. We say things like, the U.S. is concerned, or France is angry.
The international community is outraged.
Yes. But he asks, can a government actually be kind?
It feels cynical to just say no.
It is cynical, but he argues it's just realism. He traces this back to political realists like Machiavelli and Adam Smith. The argument is that a state is not a person, it's a machine.
Right. It doesn't have feelings, it has interests, power, wealth, order.
Exactly.
Okay, but hear me out. We live in democracies. If the people are moral and the people vote, shouldn't the state reflect that morality? If I care about human rights, shouldn't my government?
You would hope so. But the source points to a landmark political science study to debunk that specific hope. It's by Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page from 2014.
Right, I've heard of this one. It's massive.
It really is. They analyzed nearly 1,800 policy cases in the U.S. over a 20-year period. From 1981 to 2002, they basically wanted to see who actually gets what they want when laws are passed.
And I'm guessing it wasn't the average voter who's getting their way.
Not even close. Their data showed that economic elites and business lobbies have a massive direct impact on policy. But the average citizen,
Let me guess.
the study concluded they have little or no independent influence.
Little or no influence. That is so bleak.
It is bleak. So the author's logic follows from that. If the U.S. government routinely ignores the needs of its own struggling citizens...
The people who actually vote for them.
Right. Why on earth would we assume they care deeply about the human rights of strangers in the Middle East?
That's a really fair point. If you won't fix the potholes or the healthcare system at home, why are you spending billions to fix a country halfway around the world?
And speaking of spending, the author drops what I think is the most devastating statistic in the entire speech. He calls it the child mortality argument.
Oh, man. This part actually stopped me cold. It's just simple math, but it really hurts to look at.
It's a literal cost-benefit analysis of human life. So he cites The Lancet, which is one of the world's top medical journals. They estimate that every single year, somewhere between 5 and 9 million children under the age of 5 die from totally preventable causes.
We're talking diarrhea, pneumonia, malnutrition.
Things we have had the cure for decades.
Right.
Now, medical economists estimate that saving about 6 million of those kids would cost roughly $5.1 billion a year.
Right.
That pays for the medicine, the food, the clean water, everything.
$5.1 billion, which, to be fair, sounds like a lot of money to an average person.
It sounds like a lot. But the author compares it to the machinery of war. In 2023, the U.S. military budget was $916 billion.
Wow. Okay, would you put it next to that number?
China was at $296 billion, Russia at $109 billion. But let's just stick to the U.S. number. $5.1 billion is roughly half of 1% of the U.S. military budget.
Half of 1%. So wait, the argument he's making is, if you really cared about saving innocent lives, you could save 6 million children by just finding some loose change in the Pentagon's sofa cushions.
Precisely. You wouldn't even have to cancel a major fighter jet program. You'd just have to trim the absolute margins. But they don't do it.
So the author asks, if a state won't spend 0.5% of its budget to save 6 million kids with basic medicine, is it intellectually honest to believe they are spending billions to bomb a country because they suddenly care about human rights?
It really frames intervention as a lie, doesn't it?
Yeah. It says if they come, they aren't coming to save you. They're coming because it serves a ledger somewhere.
Right. Humanitarianism isn't the driver. It's the hood ornament. The engine is always geopolitics.
There's another metric he brings up that I think is totally overlooked in these war debates. We usually just count the dead from bombs or bullets. But he talks about infant mortality as a predictor of state failure.
Yes, the under 5 mortality rate. It's like the canary in the coal mine for a society. If that number goes up, society is collapsing. The author cites a 2025 UN study looking at countries that have been saved by Western intervention.
Air quotes around saved.
Exactly. In Afghanistan, the rate is 55 deaths per 1,000 births. In Iraq, it's 22. In Libya, it's 30.
Those are grim numbers. That means the basic infrastructure, like the plumbing of society, is just broken.
Completely broken.
How does Iran compare to those right now?
Currently, Iran is at 11. Now, 11 isn't perfect by any means, but it's much closer to Canada's rate of 6 or France's 4 than it is to Afghanistan's 55.
So despite the repression, the theocracy, the crushing sanctions, the actual health infrastructure in Iran is still functioning.
It is. And the author's fear, his direct warning to the diaspora, is that a foreign invasion doesn't just remove the mullahs. It destroys that plumbing. It pushes that 11 up to a 55.
You aren't saving the population if you destroy the very systems that keep their babies alive.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the conceptual argument. States don't inherently care, and the math proves it. But let's play devil's advocate here. Even if their motives are completely selfish, surely sometimes it works out. Maybe they do the right thing for the wrong reasons. I mean, people look back at the 90s, the post-Cold War era, as a time when the West actually tried to fix things.
Well, let's look at the actual record. This brings us to segment 2, the historical question.
Yeah.
The author tracks what is essentially a major rebranding exercise.
A rebranding.
Yeah. Think back to the Cold War. When the U.S. toppled the government in Iran in 1953, or Chile in 1971, did they pretend it was for human rights?
No. Looking at the history books, it was containment, it was fighting communism. They were pretty open about it being strategic.
Right. But then the Berlin Wall falls, the Soviet Union collapses. You can't use the Red Scare as an excuse to invade people anymore. So the author argues the marketing department got to work.
Interesting.
The actions stayed the exact same. Coups, bombings, interventions. But the label on the tin changed to humanitarian intervention.
Just a fresh coat of paint on the same tank.
Precisely. And he walks us through the hall of shame of this era. He starts with Iraq in the 90s. The sanctions were sold to the world as a way to weaken Saddam Hussein. You know, we're helping the Iraqi people get free.
I remember that narrative.
Yeah.
But the reality on the ground was very different.
The reality was that the sanctions devastated the civilian population, hundreds of thousands of excess deaths, but they actually strengthened Saddam.
Because when food is scarce, the guy who controls the ration cards is king.
Exactly. It made the population entirely dependent on the very tyrant the U.S. said they were fighting.
Okay, but what about Kosovo in 1999? I feel like that's the one intervention people always point to as the success story,
Right.
the jewel in the crown.
That is definitely the standard Western narrative. But the source pushes back hard on this. He points to documentation showing that the NATO bombing actually escalated the atrocities on the ground. It gave the Milosevic regime cover to speed up their ethnic cleansing. Plus, and this is really important for international law, it bypassed the UN entirely. It was a unilateral action.
And then there was Libya in 2011.
Ah, Libya. The classic bait and switch. It started as a no-fly zone. The promise was just, we're going to stop Gaddafi's planes from bombing civilians.
Which on its face sounds reasonable. If planes are bombing people, stop the planes.
But within weeks, NATO transformed that mandate into a full-scale regime change operation. They toppled the government. And the result wasn't a flourishing democracy. It was state collapse, mass death, open slave markets being reported in 2024, a civil war that is still destabilizing the entire region.
It's an incredibly depressing track record.
Yeah.
But the author argues that the myth isn't just about the interventions that failed, it's also about the ones that never happened. The hypocrisy.
This is a crucial point. If you are truly the world police, you should arrest all criminals, right? Not just the ones you don't like.
Right.
But the author points to Turkey in the 1990s. Turkey is a NATO member. At the time, they were brutally repressing their Kurdish population, killing around 10,000 people, destroying 3,500 villages.
And since this was a massive humanitarian crisis, the U.S. stepped in to stop it.
Quite the opposite. They sent more weapons. U.S. arms shipments to Turkey actually peaked in 1997, right when the atrocities were at their absolute worst.
That is damning.
And he brings it right up to the present day with Gaza in 2025. He cites a September 2025 UN Commission and the International Association of Genocide Scholars. They concluded the bombardment constituted a genocide. Yet, Western states didn't stop the weapons flow. In some cases, they expedited it.
So the unspoken rule is, we help our friends commit atrocities, and we only intervene against our enemies.
Precisely. It's selective humanitarianism, which by definition isn't humanitarianism, it's just politics with a halo.
But hold on, I want to challenge this one more time. Has no one ever stopped a genocide? Are we saying it's completely impossible?
Yeah.
Surely in the history of the world, a military has stopped a slaughter.
No, you're right. And this is where the author throws a fascinating curveball. He admits there are two clear cases in modern history where a foreign invasion actually stopped a genocide.
Okay.
India intervening in Bangladesh in 1971, and Vietnam intervening in Cambodia in 1979 to stop the Khmer Rouge.
Okay, so it can be done.
It can. But here is the twist that ruins the Western narrative. The U.S. condemned both of them.
Wait, really? The Khmer Rouge?
Yeah.
Pol Pot? The U.S. opposed stopping that.
Not only opposed it, when Vietnam invaded to stop the slaughter, the U.S. punished Vietnam with harsh sanctions. They even backed a retaliatory invasion by China.
You're kidding, no.
And in 1971, when India moved to stop the Pakistani army from massacring Bengalis, Henry Kissinger, who was the U.S. National Security Advisor, was furious. He even considered using nuclear threats against India.
That is mind-blowing. The two times someone actually acted like a humanitarian intervener, the U.S. was on the side of the perpetrators.
It certainly reinforces the author's point that saving lives is simply not the operating software of the U.S. State Department. If saving lives aligns with their interests, great. If not, they will watch it burn or even sell the matches.
Okay, so we've established the concept is shaky and the history is contradictory at best. Let's move to segment 3, the normative question. Let's say we lived in an ideal world. Is there ever a time when the author thinks intervention is legitimate? Or is he just a total pacifist?
He's not a pacifist, he's a philosopher. So he lays out a framework. 4 specific criteria for a theoretically valid intervention.
Okay, what are they?
First is last resort. You have to have truly exhausted every single nonviolent method. Sanctions, diplomacy, everything.
Makes sense.
Second is impartial motivation. The agents intervening must be neutral. You can't be doing it to secure oil rights or build a military base. Third is multilateral legitimacy.
Meaning you can't just act like a cowboy. You need the UN or the global community to recognize it.
Right. And the fourth one is the most interesting, especially for this context. Causal innocence.
Causal innocence. Break that down for me.
Basically, the country intervening cannot be the one who helped create the crisis in the first place. You can't set the house on fire and then claim to be the hero for calling the fire department.
Ah. And I'm guessing the author thinks the U.S. fails this test spectacularly regarding Iran.
Completely. He argues the U.S. blatantly violates causal innocence because they actively helped break the Iranian economy. He points to the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, the nuclear deal in 2018, and the imposition of secondary sanctions.
He references a specific UN report here, right? The Duhan report?
Yes, from October 2022. Alina Duhan is a UN Special Rapporteur. She went to Iran and found that these sanctions directly harmed human rights. The right to life, the right to development. They weakened the very civil society that is supposed to be fighting for democracy.
So the logic is, you strangle the economy, you made the people weak and desperate, so you don't get to swoop in now and say, look at this mess, let us fix it.
Exactly. And he also points to the actual intent of U.S. policy. He notes that the 2025 U.S. National Security Strategy doesn't even use the phrase democracy promotion regarding Iran anymore.
What do they call it now?
They use a new term, strategic incapacitation.
Strategic incapacitation. That sounds very clinical and not very liberating.
It means the goal isn't to free Iran, it's to break Iran, to strip it of defenses so it's a non-threat. That is a military goal, not a humanitarian one.
Okay, so we've audited the history and the philosophy, but now we really need to talk about the people on the ground. Segment 4 covers the fallacies. The author is speaking directly to those Iranians, mostly in the diaspora, who are still begging for an invasion.
Right. He breaks their arguments down into 3 logical traps or fallacies.
The first one is the no other way argument.
Yes, and this is the desperation speaking. You hear people say, the regime is too strong, it's too repressive, foreign missiles are literally the only way left.
Which feels intuitive if you're desperate. I can completely understand why someone would think that. What's his rebuttal?
The rebuttal is that bombing isn't a way to democracy at all. It's a dead end. He argues that historical evidence shows you cannot bomb your way to secularism. If you destroy the social fabric to save it, you haven't found a way, you've signed a suicide pact.
Because war usually cements dictatorships, right?
Right.
It doesn't remove them.
Exactly. It creates a vacuum of power that is almost always filled by warlords or extremists.
Which leads right into the second fallacy he identifies, the at any price argument.
This one is incredibly heavy. The argument goes, the government has killed 7,000 to 20,000 people in these protests. They are butchers. They have to go at any price.
And we really have to validate that anger.
Yeah.
The source acknowledges the tragedy of those deaths. He specifically mentions the slaughter that happened on January 8th and 9th.
He absolutely does. He pulls no punches. He calls the government illegitimate. But he argues that saying at any price is emotionally understandable, but logically fatal. Because if your stated goal is to save human lives, you cannot advocate for a method like foreign invasion that historically kills 10 times more people than the regime's repression did.
It's a really harsh calculus. You can't say, I want to stop the killing by inviting a war that might kill 500,000 people.
Right. It abandons cost-benefit reasoning entirely for moral absolutism.
Yeah.
He's pleading with the diaspora to think with their heads, not just their broken hearts.
And finally, the third fallacy, the action bias.
The do-something syndrome. People say, don't just criticize the idea of intervention, give me a solution right now or shut up.
It's the impatience. We see the horrific videos on social media, we feel completely helpless, and we want a quick fix. We want someone to tell us what to do right now.
The author calls this impulsive heroism. He says real alternatives aren't cooked up overnight. They take slow, organizing, sober leadership and sacrifice. And he points to a very specific example, the Tehran bus driver union.
I love that quote from the source.
Yeah.
They said, we will fight if you let us breathe.
That is the real alternative. The workers, the unions, civil society, but they need breath, meaning relief from crushing economic sanctions and state repression so they can actually organize.
They don't need to outsource their agency to a foreign military?
No, he urges the diaspora to stop looking for a savior from the West and start doing the hard, boring work of supporting internal organizing.
It's interesting. We all want the movie ending where the cavalry arrives over the hill, but real change is usually slow, boring, and internal.
Exactly.
So bringing it all together, what is the ultimate takeaway here?
The core message is that humanitarian intervention, especially by the U.S., is a narrative tool. It's a myth. It's a story told by powerful states to get good, well-meaning people to agree to bad wars.
And for the Iranian listeners specifically, the author is saying, don't be bullied. The loud voices calling for invasion might be aggressive online, but history is simply not on their side.
He explicitly advises them to listen to serious historians like Irvan Abrahamian, rather than the political demagogues shouting on social media. The author's plea is for rationality over raw emotion.
It's a heavy dive today, but a necessary one. It really makes you question the language we hear on the news every night. When you hear humanitarian intervention, you picture the unicorn. But the reality is almost always a tank.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to consider. If humanitarian intervention, this idea of nations selflessly stepping in to save each other, is a myth, does that mean the concept of the international community is a myth too?
Oh, wow. That's a scary thought.
Is it even possible to have true solidarity between peoples without the threat of military force? Or is our entire global system just raw power masquerading as friendship?
Definitely something to chew on. And hey, next time you hear a passionate speech calling for a just war, maybe go look up the boring statistics first. Check the infant mortality rate. Check the military budget. The numbers usually tell a very different story than the politicians do.
They almost always do.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See curious.